Welcome to the Kyperian Commentary Podcast. This is episode 132. I've got Kyle Hessler with me, and Kyle is here because he is, first of all, promoting a conference in the Fort Worth area coming up soon. Kyle, what are the dates for that?
That is June 20th and 29th in Fort Worth, Texas.
All right, June 20th and 29th, and that's called the Works-Based Conference. I'm going to put the link in the description, worksbased.com. But we want to talk a little bit about that and maybe talk some about the theology of work, about building Christian networks of entrepreneurs throughout the nation. So, Kyle, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here.
Great to be here. And like Abraham Kuyper is definitely a guy I really look up to. So it's great to be on a podcast that represents all of what he was about.
Right. And it sounds like one thing that's being recovered here, I think, especially since COVID, I've seen this, people with an understanding that we need Christian men to be running explicitly Christian businesses, maybe not putting little crosses on their products,
Yes.
but working as Christians with a Christian work ethic and networking with other Christians. I think that's something Kuyper would definitely be in favor of as far as extending Christ's lordship to every area of life. Tell me a little bit about what it is you're thinking to promote with this conference, what your goal was, and how it came about.
Yeah. So there's a lot of steps of how we got here, but the short version is I've always just kind of had a passion about work. I wouldn't say I'm exactly like the hardest working guy. Like I can't work with my hands very well, but I have a passion about work ethic, determination, vocation, dominion. And so that's, I work, I have like several jobs. I work for this manufacturer. I work for a Christian marketing company called Page 50. And then I have some real estate and stuff. And I'm just like a go kind of, I got a lot going on kind of guy. And that's not for everybody. In fact, it's probably not even for me. I've kind of slowed down a few of the things I've been doing. But the reality is I just care deeply about work and dominion taking and what that looks like. And I look at our modern world, and I think even in our Christian circles, we get a little hung up on certain things. So, like for example, where do we get the idea of a 40-hour work week? Well, it's communists. It's not. It's
Right.
from labor unions. It's not from a biblical worldview. Now, I think 40 hours a week at a particular job is probably about right to kind of balance everything. And I'm not begrudging a Christian employer starting a company, paying people for 40 hours of their labor. I'm not opposed to that. My point is, we don't think about how socialist and Marxist we actually are. And so
Right.
I kind of want to push back on that. I want to have
Mm-hmm.
a space and a weekend, a learning opportunity to kind of
Right.
engage these thoughts and stuff. And I always tell people as much as I can, like, don't think of me as the expert. I'm not. That's why I'm not speaking. Frankly, that's why I got Darren Doan to host the
Mm-hmm.
podcast or to host the conference, because Darren's a great host. I'm on this journey with people too.
Right.
I'm 33. I'm still working through a lot of these ideas and these concepts, and hopefully in a few years maybe I'll be doing a talk myself. But my point largely is that we just need to recover a godly view of work and work ethics and dominion, and how your vocation relates to your dominion, so on and so forth. There's a lot of things to unpack, but that's kind of what spurred it on. And I've helped a few different people run some conferences, and I was like, this is something I think I could do,
Yeah.
because I've put on events before. So it was kind of naturally, there was the ideas, and then there was the practical, and then there was the kind of opportunity, and all of it just kind of lined up. So that's how Workspace came to be.
This is really good stuff to think about. Even, I like your idea of, the 40-hour work week. That came from socialism and communism. That was the origin.
Exactly.
Even our idea of a weekend, it's a
Yep.
weekend conference, but the idea that you get Saturday and Sunday off, the Bible says 6 days shall you labor and do all your work. The seventh day is
Yep.
the Sabbath. And traditionally, especially in America, that's Sunday, the Christian Sabbath. The idea of a 2-day weekend is a fairly recent innovation, 20th century. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with working a job 5 days a week. You need a day to maintain your property, work on your house, do things with your
Yep.
family. But just the idea that that's what work is. You clock in, you do your 40 hours, you clock out, and you get a paycheck. I was talking to a friend literally just earlier today about this very topic, and he was saying he was having trouble figuring out uh, whether his job had any value. I think sometimes, we feel like we want meaning, we want purpose. Someone's got to work the factory job. Someone's got to clean the streets. These are jobs that have to be done in society. Uh, do you see a place where maybe Christians are lacking, though, in their theology of the meaning of work, the value of work? Uh, if you're not a teacher or you're not a pastor or you're not a doctor, one of those sorts of
Yeah.
jobs where you can say, oh, I see how I help people every day. Where do you find the value in the work that you do? What do you think?
Yeah, that's honestly, this is probably the question to lead off with most things. So a couple notes. One, I encourage everyone to read David Bonson's book Full Time because he talks
Mhm.
about this in a
And he's
more
speaking at the conference too.
correct.
We'll
Yep,
put that
he's one
up.
of our keynote guys.
Right.
Um, but one of the main things that we've lost that it was recovered in the Reformation was basically dignity of work. And so we, in the 14th, 15th centuries, there was a lot of, well, I need to be working in the monastery. I need to do this. I need to do this. And that's not biblical. It's not biblical because we're called to be bricklayers. We're called to be Wall Street guys. We're called to be everything. Like dominion taking is not. In fact, I would go so far as to say dominion taking is less looking like the Sunday school teacher or the pastor than it is the guy that's trying to build ships to
Right.
help cargo ships to help get little widgets overseas.
Right.
Like clearly we need education and all that stuff. I'm not trying to diminish
Mhm.
that, but I'm saying in a larger sense, it's more important for somebody to be developing um, goods and services than it is to be a pastor. They're
Right.
and they're also different. But one of the things I would also encourage people to do is look up a little book called Brother Lawrence. I bet you can get off Amazon for like $2, right? Little book. It's about this monk in a monastery who talked about sweeping the monastery to the glory of God, and that's
Right.
all it is. We need to take that and explode it because that book is
Mhm.
great and it's practical, it's thoughtful,
Right.
but we also need to understand like what is he getting at? And he's getting at there's dignity found in just doing your work. So
Right.
there's a dignity in your job. Well, let's back it up. So you have job, you have vocation, and then you have dominion. Everybody's called to dominion. Your vocation is more like if you're a woman, I'm a full-time mom, or am I, Sunday school teacher also, or stuff that's applicable more for women in their roles when they're kind of obviously kind of fitting along with uh, Proverbs 31 sort of thing. I don't want to go too much in that. I want to keep this more about men, but I do want to say I'm not saying women can't have jobs. I'm saying it's got to be in the context of what the Bible says.
Mhm.
But vocation relates to like, are you a sales guy? Are you a bricklayer? Are you a candlestick maker? That kind of stuff. And then your job is like where you're actually making your money. And I would say that we need to think about your dominion and vocation a little bit more in depth. I think we get too focused on jobs,
Mhm.
and that's how you get people like your friend who was saying like, I just don't feel like my job is that glorifying to God. It's like, well, that's partially because your job is kind of transient. Jobs come and go.
Right.
I mean, truthfully, I took an interview today.
Mhm.
So I'm looking at maybe taking a different opportunity. I don't know if I will or won't, but what my point is that's my job. That's not my vocation. My vocation relates closer to exercising dominion than my job does. Um, and so I just think that we need to kind of recover a vision of what that looks like and understand that your vocation relates to how men take dominion. And whether you're laying, you're a plumber or electrician or whatever, you're taking dominion right then and there. And more importantly, because dominion is kind of ambiguous, like how am I taking dominion laying a pipe? You got to remember you're also glorifying God by that work
Right.
because God created, God's a creator, he's a worker. And in Genesis, he takes nothing and makes something. And then he tells us to take that something and make more somethings. That's first three chapters of the Bible. And so you're glorifying God by reflecting his image in creating. That's just basic biblical understanding. First three chapters of
Yeah.
the Bible.
And I think one thing that you mentioned even earlier about education, I think everyone I think everyone needs to be well educated. I think there's, that's what the job of parents is in raising their children as Christians, to give them a good, solid Christian education. But that's different from schooling, right?
Yes.
Education and schooling. And it used to be you would go to college or university for some sort of liberal arts education because that was what you were being called to. I'm going to do the law. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be,
Right.
a pastor or something like that. It seems like over the last 60 or 70 years, especially since World War II, I believe, the primary purpose of college or university has become certification. So you go there to
Yes.
get job certification so that you don't have to work one of those lousy blue collar jobs, right? You go to college, you get your piece of paper, and now you are guaranteed a cushy job for the rest of your life. And that's obviously not what has happened. That's a promise that's been made to a lot of people and has
Right.
not come to fruition. And I think that's a really good recalibration to say, well, what has God called me to? Has he called me to this sort of job? Then this is what I need to pursue to get there. To
Yes.
fulfill that calling. There could be a variety of jobs within that vocation, within that calling that would help you pursue that. But sort of the cookie cutter, everybody goes to high school, everybody goes to college, everyone gets their degree, and then everyone gets a job at McDonald's because they can't get anything else with their degree. It's really
Well, until the
been an
machines
empty
replace them.
promise for a lot of people in our culture today, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that you're dead on the money. And I think I'm a big fan of Mike Rowe from Dirty
Hmm.
Jobs. And there's an old clip of him talking about how he had two experiences, kind of somebody watching the show. One was um, kind of a more of a blue collar family watched the show, and they're like, "See, son," like he was telling us, the guy watching it was telling his son, like, "See, you can make a lot of money working really hard." And then he said a
Right.
Wall Street guy was watching it, and he said, "See, son, if you don't go to college, this is how you end up doing this kind of work." And it's just like the
Yeah.
guy is explaining how he's a multimillionaire being a poop scooper,
Right.
like, or whatever the job was. And it's like you're missing the point. Like,
Hmm.
now, I want to back up and tell the reform circles, because I think we have a tendency to kind of high prioritize blue collar work
Hmm.
uh, to some degree. Like, I know a lot of people that have quit a good paying job to be like a candle maker, or like,
Right. I think
I'm
that's
gonna.
pretty recent, though. I think that's kind of a
I
trend last
I
50 years or
agree.
so.
Yeah, I think I'm calling it the homesteading movement, and I
Hmm.
think you're right. I think it's
Right.
a very recent thing, that there's some like extra holiness found in it, and we can talk about this too, but my supposition is also it's men thinking they need to be homebodied more
Right.
than they actually are. Like, oh, this is how things were 1,000 years
Hmm.
ago, and for most of history is like you made your profits on your land, but we're not in that spot anymore. But we can talk about that if you want. But
Right.
going back to the
Well,
larger
that sounds
point
like
is,
something for you to argue with C.R. Wiley about at your conference,
so
because he
he's
talks a
but
little
he's
bit about that.
yeah, but
Sorry to
he's with
derail the
me.
conversation, but
No.
yeah.
He's with me. We did an hour long
Right.
podcast that I got to release at
Okay.
some point. And that was something like he's probably more leaning that way. But like we talked about, he's very clear that it's the priority needs to be oriented to the home. But he's not
Hmm.
saying that guys need to go work at home.
Right.
He's saying the priority because his whole thing is um the Industrial Revolution split the home and the work. And
Right.
so you have to go to the work and then come back to the home.
Hmm.
And his point is we got to figure out how to kind of, we don't have to throw that away, because you can't. Like, you can't have we can't make cars the way we do until robots are doing almost all of it. But you can't
Right.
do manufacturing goods or a lot of the services that we have in the modern world without doing it. But even forget even like manufacturing stuff, like electrical contractors, they can't do their job from home, they have to go
Right.
to their clients. So his thing isn't, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but his thing isn't toss that away. He's suggesting we need to figure out how to get that, balance that back
Hmm.
with the new challenges we have. And I wholeheartedly agree.
Right.
I do want, like, for example, one of the things I do with my job right now is I try to take my son who's 3. I've taken him on sales trips for the last year or so, because I want us oriented as a family, even though he's traveling with me to like
Hmm.
Memphis or Oregon or wherever it may be. And I want him kind of with me and having the family day together, even though we're not at home. And that's the things I think we need to kind of recover is, and this is in Bonson's book,
Hmm.
you nobody thinks when they show up to their office, oh, I'm done being a husband because I'm at the home, or I mean,
Right.
I'm at the office. But why do we think that when you come through the door at the house, you stop being a sales guy or an electrician or whatever? You're still that.
Hmm.
That's why I phrase things with the vocation thing, because your vocation is who you are. You're defined by your work. So I'm a sales guy. I'm always a sales guy. Until I change vocations, I'm always going to be a sales guy. So when I'm sleeping at midnight, I'm still a sales guy. As much as I am a husband, now that doesn't mean I have to, again, coming back to the job thing, you have healthy boundaries of like when you'll answer calls and go to
Right.
work and all. Like nobody's telling you to work 18 hours a day. One, because I don't think that's good, and I think you're sacrificing your family. But there are people that need to work much longer hours just to make it by, or it's good for them. There's guys that need to work oil rigs that need to be gone for months at a time. Like that stuff is real, and I don't want to diminish it. But my point is more, we need to recover this view that you are who you are your work. You
Right.
you relate back to that.
So if I'm hearing you right too, I mean, this relates very integrally to your family
Yes.
and what your family is, because with the other mindset, like I work at a steel company, I go do my work, I come home, and then home is just the place of, I shed all of that. I just bring home money to be spent.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. Versus, okay, guys, we're a team. Dad works at the steel company, and we're all doing what we can to make sure he fulfills that well. Like this is the goal of the family to be oriented in a certain direction because the husband has a vocation, the wife has a vocation as well, and that's to come alongside the husband and
Yes.
to be a suitable helper for him in his vocation, right? And I think you get the 1950s ideal where that guy goes to work, brings him the paycheck, mom goes shopping, and there's a total disconnect, like you're talking about, between what happens at work and what happens at home.
Yeah, and I mean, there's also an element too, like of when when money becomes this transient thing, which it is transitory, but it's not trans. Like what I mean is, when I'm at work, my labor is translated into money. That money can be then used by whatever goods and service I want to do. But what you kind of lose in the middle of that is actually the dignity found in your work. So we're called to go to work because it's a creation mandate, but we're also called to work because we are called to provide and
Mhm.
take dominion with our wealth. So when you take this money though, and you kind of just like, here you go, wife, you're not really giving her the opportunity to become a Proverbs 31 woman. You're kind of just, this is like you said, there's a huge disconnect because now you're not really relating to each other. Now, I don't think it's fair to say, or I don't think what either of us are saying is that the man needs to be involved in every single purchase or things like
Right,
that.
not what I'm
But
saying.
we're saying that there's something lost in that. Man
Mhm.
works, brings home the bacon, and then the wife takes the bacon and does something with it. There's something
Mhm.
lost in that, and I think that has still not been recovered since the Industrial Revolution. Like there's still something there that we need to kind of get back, and I don't know what it is exactly, but I know that we're missing it.
Yeah. Well, I think you see that in certain professions, there's almost has to be a connection, and I'm trying to think, for instance, if let's say your husband is a doctor and he's going to be bringing his associates home for dinner, and the wife can really get involved in that and the whole family can be involved, that sort of profession. Or especially as a pastor, you're a pastor's family, right? And so
Right.
everyone in the family is involved in that. But there's been a real disconnect, I think, in a lot of professions with what you're talking about. Even I think about when you're a little kid in elementary school, you think your teachers are all really good people. And there was a time when that was expected. Like if you're a school teacher teaching children, then your family is going to be held to a certain moral standard in the community.
Yes.
And now there's a disconnect. What I do at work and what happens at home are totally separate. There's no connection. That kind of division between the two halves of your life. Anyway, just I'm spitballing here. I don't really have
Well,
a
let me let
place
me
I'm
let me
going with
jump
that.
off something. Let
Yeah.
me jump off something you said because I think it relates to something I'm super passionate about, which is the family part. When we look at the qualifications for elders and deacons, it's very clear. Like I'm Presbyterian, so I'm
Right.
we're baptizing babies and all that. But part of the like church ordinance that we look at as far as for deacons and elders is that they do have a family that's well behaved, and so by extension, it's saying so my church is currently we're looking at hiring another pastor. I do kind of in my mind separate pastors and elders, but
Yeah.
regardless of that, that if he's hired as a pastor, he'll be made an elder. So one of the things that's happening this week while he's in town is that we're kind of interviewing not just him, but we're looking at his kids, we're looking at his wife. And so one of the nights, the all the ladies are getting together to hang out with his wife and kind of just talk and see if there's any red flags or anything like that. By extension, we're evaluating his whole family, really. So it's one of those things where I do think this is for a church role, but I do think it relates back to the dominion aspect of what we're talking about in the sense of like, you know, you as all men should ascribe to be deacons of the church at minimum. And so if you're going to be a deacon of your church, you need to be well thought of in the community, which relates to your job. And then you should be uh, well thought of with your family dynamic. And so those things are tied together. I don't think I don't think there's all these separations that we do that you have your
Right.
family, you have work, you have church. They're you. Like we've, the left is really good on the identity politics. And so I think we've all kind of taken a bunch of steps back from identity. But the reality is like our identity is, yes, first and foremost found in Christ. But second off, our identity is found in a lot more than just that. Like I think we've all kind of shied away from saying, well, identify as a salesman or identify as a uh, person that does like jujitsu or I'm a weightlifter. We kind of like shy off that because it seems very worldly and earthy and materialistic, but it's not. That is who you are, and I think we should embrace that. So like when we're talking about uh, the dominion, it comes back to like how is your family involved in you as a husband, as a father, taking dominion of your little slice of the world. And I don't think it's not as easy to just dismiss that, but I think we
Right.
have.
Yeah. Let's circle back a little bit to the conference that's
Yeah,
happening.
great.
So, you're having David Bunson there, your pastor, Steve Jeffrey. Uh, you've got, I think I saw C.R. Wiley is on the list. Um, Darren Doan. There's someone else.
David Reese.
David Reese, right? So a really great lineup of guys
Yeah,
there who are going to be speaking on a lot of these similar topics, I'm sure, to what we're talking about. Only,
yep,
they're the experts, so they're
yeah.
they're going to
We
be
also
going a little deeper.
we
Go
also
ahead.
we also got Andrew Krabashitz of Red
Oh,
Balloon.
okay.
Yep, who's an elder also at Christ Church up in Moscow, um,
And
Idaho.
he's the guy behind Red Balloon, right?
Correct. Yep, he's
Right.
the
Okay.
CEO. So these are all guys that know they were picked very specifically. They're picked for their expertise in a certain area. And so I'm very glad with the people we put together, particularly Bonson, because he did just write a book on pretty much all that we're talking about called Full Time.
Hmm.
And if you can't make the conference, and I mean, we'll talk about why you should come to the conference, but
Hmm.
I will say this is if you want to save some money and just read a book instead, read his book because his book came out before or I'd booked him to be on our show and then his book came out and I was like, oh, this is everything. So
I'm going to write that
full
down
time.
so I remember it.
Yeah, it's a great book. I've already gone through it a couple times. So it's really good stuff. But yeah, we'll have Steve Jeffrey talking about the vocation of work. Bonson's going to be talking about his book and a few other things. Andrew Krebishitz is going to be talking about hiring people, which I think is really critical for small business owners. David Reese is going to be talking about investing and how Dominion relates back to wise investments. And then C.R. Wiley is going to talk about a little bit of kind of like broader picture stuff, like we were
Hmm.
talking
Yeah.
earlier. So it's a good group of guys. And then Darren Doan is hosting it. I'm sure we'll get some 2 cents from him every once in a while. But if you know Darren, Darren is on the cutting edge of marketing and business in terms of like he is helping so many people make so much money because he's so thoughtful about how we need to be in the world right now. That
Right.
makes sense.
So who is this conference aimed at? It's not a theology conference necessarily. It's not like a um what is it that Cross Politic does? I can't remember now.
Fight,
Fight
laugh,
Laugh
feast.
Feast. It's not Fight Laugh Feast, the
No.
family conference. Who are you aiming this at? I know it's men, but what men should think about the conference, consider coming?
Well, I would say so. We do have family and couples ticket pricing available because we do want to encourage the wives to be there.
Hmm.
Um, our thoughts have been this is more targeted at men. It is a conference more for men who, I mean, we do want to kind of push back against the world and say like men are the ones called to work, and we want women basically being at home with their children as much as possible. Um, so I would say it's targeted mostly at men, but it's targeted at as far as like we don't want it to be people thinking like this is a white collar kind of job only sort of thing. It's we've got blue collar, we've got white collar. It really is meant for anybody that I would say is serious about their work, serious about vocation, and wants to learn, but also like, and this is why you should come to the conference, is it's going to be a hub of networking.
Mm.
We want guys to come to this conference and find new opportunities, whether it's employment or investing opportunities. We want guys to come here and be like, "Oh, I own a little painting business, and I found a guy that does financial management, or he's a CPA, or oh, Red Balloon's here and I need to hire a couple guys." I want people to come here and say, like, oh, good, I can stop using Indeed.com. I can use Red Balloon. So we do want it to have like a strong in-person element where it's like, yeah, the talks are great, but it was the community, it was the fellowshipping that was way more influential. And in that way, it's somewhat like cross politic, or I mean, the Fight Laugh Feast conference, in terms of like, we do want people to like walk away from it saying like, oh, I got to hang out with a bunch of brothers in Christ and it was a great time. Um, but we do, it's a business conference. So we do want people to kind of have the expectation of like, I'm coming here to get stuff done.
Right. And that too is really important more and more today as, if you're working with companies that don't have a very particular Christian vision,
Yes.
you're going to get fired sometimes if you won't use people's pronouns. You're going to get,
Yes.
as the woke virus spreads, it's becoming more and more important for Christians of all vocations to kind of create networks linked together and know they can depend on each other when they can't depend on maybe a secular liberal to even offer them a service, right?
Yeah. Yep. And but let me flip that around just
Right.
slightly. And only because I think it's really important. Um, I think in our era and in our super reform circles, we need to have opportunities to push back on like the red pill kind of mentality. So
Hmm.
I don't want people coming to this conference thinking, or I don't want somebody to come to this conference and then hear a bunch of stuff and then think, oh man, I've got to quit my job at Amazon because they're woke.
Right.
That's not what we're saying.
Hmm.
Now, if you feel compelled to do that in
Hmm.
the sense of like, hey, there's a better opportunity, go
Hmm.
for it. But we don't
Or
want
if
people to
Amazon fires you, right?
right, and that's completely different. But
That's
if
different
if
from, yeah,
if Egypt is still offering you, here, take our gold, take it.
right.
I don't want guys coming and thinking they have to be compelled to quit a job that provides for their family because it's a woke corporation. Now, we're obviously not talking about like if you work at a strip club or something like that. We're talking about like, oh, I work for Disney or I work for Audible or I work for Target. Brother, if you're getting a good paying job, take Dominion there. Like you can push back, just be expecting to lose your job. But if like you work at Target and they're trying to make you use your pronouns on the little name tag, don't do it. See what happens. But you don't have to quit your job over it. You also don't have to quit your job because, oh, I need to go work for a Christian. Well, if an opportunity comes, then take it. But if it doesn't, you don't have to feel compelled to do that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And I really, I don't like when we in these reform circles encourage people to quit good paying jobs to take lesser paying jobs if it's because it's less woke.
Yeah.
I don't. Now, if the guy's miserable, I mean, there's obviously other circumstances, but I'm
Right.
just saying in general, I want guys to feel encouraged at their duty station, not discouraged.
Right. Well, it sounds like it's going to be a really great conference, and thanks
Yeah.
for coming to talk to us, Kyle. Okay, I was glancing at the website again. I didn't see the date. Remind us of those dates. It's in June.
Yep. June 28th and 29th. We do have a special speakers dinner June 27th at the Ruth Chris there, but the actual conference is the 28th and 29th of June. Tickets are at workspace.com, worksbased.com. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of those platforms for updated stuff or content we're releasing. We've got a bunch of cool interviews we got coming out soon. But yeah, tickets are available workspace.com.
All right, and I'll make sure to put all the information in the description. So thanks for being with us, Kyle.
Thanks, Rick. I appreciate it.